Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is once again facing renewed public attention, and this time it comes through a major new Channel 4 documentary that is set to examine the Epstein Files scandal in detail. The upcoming forensic series is already being described as one of the most significant television projects connected to the case, not only because of the subject matter, but because of the person leading it. Emily Maitlis will front the documentary, bringing the story full circle in a way that has immediately caught the attention of royal watchers. Maitlis, of course, is the journalist who conducted the now infamous BBC Newsnight interview with the former Duke of York in 2019, an interview that became one of the most damaging royal television moments in modern history. That interview was supposed to help Andrew explain his connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, it became a turning point in his public life, intensifying scrutiny and contributing to the collapse of his role as a working royal. Now, years later, Maitlis is returning to the wider Epstein story, but this time, the focus appears to be much bigger than one interview, one royal figure, or one set of headlines. Channel 4 says the documentary will examine documents, networks, powerful individuals, and the system that allowed Epstein's criminal operation to continue for so long. That framing matters because it suggests this will not simply be another retelling of Andrew's public downfall. It is being positioned as a forensic look at wealth, influence, institutional protection, and accountability. For Andrew, however, the timing is deeply uncomfortable. Although he has repeatedly denied wrongdoing, every new investigation, documentary, or public statement connected to Epstein inevitably brings his name back into the conversation. His association with Epstein has already cost him his royal duties, military titles, public reputation, and much of his position inside the royal family. The announcement of this documentary adds another layer of pressure at a time when questions around his past role, contacts, and public responsibilities continue to resurface. The program is expected to examine how Epstein was able to avoid full accountability for so long, despite the scale of the allegations and the number of powerful people in his orbit. That is the central question that has haunted the case for years. How did a convicted sex offender continue moving through elite circles? How did money, influence, and social access create protection? And who around him knew enough to be questioned more closely? Emily Maitlis has made clear that she sees the Epstein case as a story about power as much as crime. Speaking ahead of the documentary's release, she described it as a web of wealth, influence, and impunity, one that destroyed lives and was shielded by institutions people are supposed to trust. Her comments suggest the series will not simply revisit old headlines, but will attempt to connect the wider pattern of protection and silence that surrounded Epstein for decades. That is what makes this documentary potentially explosive. The Epstein scandal has never been only about one man. It has always been about the people around him, the institutions that gave him access, the circles that welcomed him back, and the victims who spent years waiting to be believed. Channel 4 appears to be leaning directly into that uncomfortable territory, promising testimony, document analysis, and a serious examination of the networks connected to Epstein's world. For the royal family, the renewed attention is another reminder of how difficult it has been to fully move beyond Andrew's association with Epstein. King Charles has tried to reshape the monarchy around duty, restraint, and a smaller working royal structure. Prince William is increasingly seen as the face of the future institution, but Andrew remains a recurring problem because his name continues to surface whenever Epstein is discussed. Even though Andrew is no longer a working royal, his connection to the family cannot be erased. He remains the king's brother, He remains a former senior royal. He once held public responsibilities and represented Britain abroad as a trade envoy. That means questions about his judgment, his associations, and his conduct do not remain purely private. They become part of a broader conversation about public trust. That is why former Prime Minister Gordon Brown's recent comments have added further seriousness to the situation. Brown has called for Andrew to be re-interviewed by police over issues connected to his time as trade envoy, including questions about his use of public funds. He also argued that authorities should look more closely at allegations connected to Epstein's activities and whether women were brought into the UK through Epstein's network. Andrew has always denied allegations against him, and it is important to state that clearly, but Brown's intervention shows that calls for further scrutiny are not coming only from campaigners or online critics. They are also being raised by major political figures. Brown's argument is that the investigation should be widened, particularly if documents or emails suggest any misuse of official position, public resources, or government-related material. He has suggested that if official documents were shared with outside contacts in ways that went beyond normal advice seeking, then authorities should examine whether there were possible breaches involving public office or official secrets. These are serious questions, and they go beyond the personal scandal that has long surrounded Andrew. For Andrew's defenders, the repeated return to these issues may feel like an endless cycle of public punishment. They may argue that he has denied wrongdoing, stepped away from royal duties, settled civil litigation without admission of liability, and lost his public platform. But for critics, that is not enough. They argue that the Epstein case is too large, too damaging, and too unresolved for public figures connected to him to simply fade out of view without deeper answers. That is where the Channel 4 documentary may become important. Television investigations can shape public understanding in a powerful way, especially when they bring documents, survivor testimony, and expert analysis into one narrative. The Newsnight interview changed Andrew's life because it allowed the public to judge his answers directly. This new series could have a different impact by placing his story within the wider system that allowed Epstein to operate. The documentary's producers appear to be focusing on the uncomfortable question of how power protects itself. Channel 4's head of news and current affairs, Louisa Compton, described the Epstein story as an exposure of how wealth can distort justice and how abuse can be hidden in plain sight. That kind of language signals a program designed not simply to shock, but to challenge institutions and audiences to consider why accountability took so long. For survivors of Epstein's abuse, that focus matters. For years, many of them have said the public conversation too often centered on famous names rather than the harm done to victims. A serious documentary has the opportunity to shift attention back to the people who suffered, the systems that failed them, and the unanswered questions they still carry. Mateless has said survivors have waited long enough and that she wants the series to provide answers, not simply raise more questions. That statement sets a high bar. The Epstein case has generated countless headlines, documentaries, podcasts, legal filings, leaked documents, and online theories. But many viewers still feel the full truth has never been clearly explained. Who enabled Epstein? Who ignored warnings? Who benefited from his access? Who should have acted sooner? And why did so many powerful spaces remain open to him? Those are the questions that make the case so persistent. Epstein is dead, but the scandal is not. The network around him, the failures that protected him, and the unanswered questions about those who associated with him continue to drive public interest. Andrew's name remains part of that because of his documented friendship with Epstein and his widely widely criticized explanations during the Newsnight interview. That 2019 interview still looms large. It was one of the rare moments when a senior royal figure sat down for a direct televised interrogation over a scandal of this magnitude. Andrew attempted to defend himself and explain his relationship with Epstein, but the interview was widely viewed as disastrous. Instead of calming public concern, it deepened it. Viewers were struck by the tone, the details, and the absence of the kind of remorse many expected. Soon afterward, Andrew stepped back from public royal duties. Emily Maitlis's involvement in the new documentary therefore carries symbolic weight. She is not an outsider arriving fresh to the subject. She is already linked to one of the most important moments in Andrew's downfall. Her return to the broader Epstein case will naturally raise expectations that the series could revisit the former Duke's position with new context, documents, or testimony. At the same time, it is important to be careful. Andrew has consistently denied wrongdoing. Any documentary examining him or others connected to Epstein will need to distinguish between established facts, allegations, legal records, testimony, and unanswered questions. The public may crave explosive revelations, but responsible reporting requires precision. That is especially true in a case involving serious abuse, powerful figures, and ongoing reputational consequences. Still, the announcement alone is already a fresh blow to Andrew because it ensures the Epstein scandal will remain in the spotlight. For someone who has largely retreated from public life, each new wave of attention makes it harder to disappear. It also creates difficulties for the monarchy, which has spent years trying to distance itself from the scandal while avoiding the appearance of indifference. King Charles has taken steps to reduce Andrew's official presence, but family ties and public curiosity remain. The royal family's challenge is that Andrew is no longer central to royal operations, yet he remains central to one of the most damaging controversies associated with the institution in recent history. That creates a dilemma. Silence can look evasive, but engagement can reignite the scandal. The documentary also arrives in a broader media environment where royal accountability is under intense scrutiny. The public is less willing than previous generations to accept vague statements or institutional silence. Viewers expect transparency, especially when public money, royal status, or official duties are involved. That is why Brown's comments about Andrew's time as trade envoy are significant. They connect the Epstein controversy to questions of public role and public resources, rather than leaving it as a purely private association. If the series explores those themes, it could deepen the conversation beyond the familiar headlines. Andrew's relationship with Epstein is already well known. What remains less fully understood by many viewers is how elite networks functioned, how access was granted, and whether public institutions failed to ask hard questions sooner. That is where a forensic documentary could make an impact. For now, the exact contents of the Channel 4 series remain to be seen. The broadcaster has promised access, testimony, and document analysis, but audiences will have to wait to see what new information, if any, the program brings forward. What is already clear is that the Epstein case continues to generate serious public concern, and Andrew's name remains tied to it in a way that has not faded. The reaction from royal watchers is likely to be intense. Some will see the documentary as necessary accountability. Others will view it as another chapter in a scandal that has already consumed years of public attention. But either way, the program is expected to reignite debate about Andrew, Epstein, and the broader culture of protection surrounding wealthy and powerful men. The central issue remains bigger than one royal. It is about whether powerful people are held to the same standard as everyone else. It is about how institutions respond when reputations, influence, and money are involved. It is about whether survivors receive truth as well as sympathy. And it is about whether the systems that enabled Epstein have truly been confronted. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor may no longer be a working royal, but the questions around his past associations have not gone away, with Emily Maitlis now leading a new Channel 4 investigation into the Epstein Files. The public conversation is about to return once again to one of the darkest and most damaging scandals connected to elite power in recent memory. For the royal family, this is another uncomfortable reminder that the Epstein shadow still lingers. For Andrew, it is another moment of scrutiny, and for the survivors, campaigners, and viewers still looking for answers, the documentary may become a major test of whether the truth can finally be examined with the depth and seriousness it deserves.